Welcome everyone to this edition of the KICS Conversations. I am Ivana Zacarias, researcher of the KICS Lab project, and it is a pleasure for me to share this space with all of you to exchange experiences and discuss topics related to education in Latin America and the Caribbean. We thank each person who is watching this content through our YouTube channel and the KICS Lab Facebook page. We invite you to follow our page and subscribe to our channel and share this content. Before I start, I would like to tell you a little bit about what KICS is. KICS is the Knowledge Innovation and Exchange Initiative promoted by the Global Partnership for Education and the International Development Research Center. To achieve its objective, KICS relies on regional hubs worldwide, where educational leaders share information, knowledge, innovation, and experiences. Among these hubs, SUMA, together with the Organization for the Eastern Caribbean States, leads the Latin America and Caribbean Hub. This hub comprises 10 countries: Dominica, Grenada, Guyana, Haiti, Honduras, Nicaragua, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Guatemala, and El Salvador. On this occasion, it is a pleasure to introduce Dr. Idilia Ferdinand from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Welcome, Dr. Idilia Ferdinand. Thank you for accepting our invitation and sharing your experience.
Greetings and to everyone, and thank you for this opportunity for us to share on the experiences of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Thank you to you, Idilia. So, I would like to start by introducing a short bio of our guest. Dr. Ferdinand is a senior education officer in the Ministry of Education, National Reconciliation and Information of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. She is responsible for school safety and research and has been involved with the school safety agenda in the country since October 2013. She collaborates with regional and international agencies on the pillars of comprehensive school safety, which includes safe school facilities, school disaster management, and resilience education. She works closely with schools in developing and testing school safety plans. So, very important for these times in this moment. So, let's start with this conversation. The idea, Idelia, is to help the audience to go through some thoughts and proposals around resilient education and school safety. I would like to start by asking about, we know about your extensive experience working for a comprehensive understanding of resilient education. From your perspective, we would like to know what do we mean when we talk about resilient education and why in contexts such as Latin America and the Caribbean it is so relevant to put this concept on the agenda.
Okay, so again, thank you for this opportunity. From my perspective, when we refer to resilient education, we are referring to the ability of our education system, which include our schools and their wider community, and other educational institutions, including the Ministry of Education, to be able to prepare, respond to, and recover from the impact of hazards and reducing the possibility of hazards becoming disasters. So it includes ensuring the safety of our school environment, equitable educational opportunities, even in the face of disasters, and the achievement of educational goals. Right? So it includes being able to continue teaching and learning despite the impacts of hazard and to ensure that the learning environment is safe.
Well, thank you very much, Idelia. And I think that it is very relevant what you have mentioned, especially in the context of a very particular year for St. Vincent. You have not only had to deal with the challenges of a pandemic, but also with the eruption of the volcano La Soufriere in April. We would like to know a little bit more about the strategies that have been implemented to mitigate the effects of both emergencies in the educational field, such as school safety plans, strengthening resilience in the school community, social emotional care of teachers, and and students are planning the school reopening and recovery after eruption, among other things.
So before I talk about that, we you had asked about the context in relation to Latin America and the Caribbean, and most persons would know that this particular region is one of the most hazard prone region of the world. We're exposed to quite a number of different things, which includes from hurricanes to volcanic eruption to earthquake to landslides to floods, health emergencies, among other threats. Right. And for us, states like ours, where emergency shelters are usually our schools, that in itself creates a number of challenges similar to what we are now experiencing since the eruption of La Soufrière. So we are in a situation where schools are expected to open in 2 weeks, but yet we still have some of our schools that are emergency shelters, and we also need to ensure that they are clean, sanitized, and repaired before the reopening of schools. So those are some of the challenges we face as a hazard prone region, right? In particular, um, you spoke about our present circumstances, and we've had to deal with the volcanic eruption. We've had to deal with a dengue outbreak. We've had to deal with COVID-19. And we were also impacted in July by Hurricane Elsa. And since then, other related meteorological events. So it has been a very challenging year, thanks to the fact that we had at the Ministry of Education, we started planning in terms of our school safety program using the three pillar approach: safe school facilities, school disaster management, and disaster risk reduction, and resilience education. So, even before the impact of these events, a lot of our schools already had school disaster management and safety plans in place with actions for specific hazards. When we were affected by COVID 19 in 2020, what we did is we asked schools to develop action plans that each school would undertake in terms of COVID 19. And those plans were guided by action plans that we provided to them using the protocols that we received from the Ministry of Education and other partners. So, because they were engaged in some level of planning before, it made it much easier for them to continue in terms of developing their own action plans for those hazards. Also, we had to put a number of other things in place besides planning. We had to do a wide assessment of our schools to ensure that the environment itself was safe if students had to return to face learning. So we look at things like hand wash station, sanitization station, isolation areas, and the cleaning of washroom and other facilities. We spent a lot of time doing awareness with the school staff, including the janitors and so on, in terms of the protocols and what were expected. And then there were other arrangements that included things like ensuring that devices were in place, ensuring that there was access to internet, putting transportation in place, feeding programs, as well as psychosocial support for students, staff, and parents.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Idelia. Very challenging, yeah, the work you are doing. Um, as I have mentioned, the volcanic eruption, the COVID, but also, yes, I didn't know that you also have the eruption of dengue. And of course, well, we knew about the hurricane, many things going on that deserve attention. And I think that it's very important for us to disseminate this and also give the opportunity to other countries to learn about what you are doing. Another important challenge that you have is the socioeconomic gap between rural and urban schools and private and public schools. According to our data, 80%, 82% of the richest quartile has access to water in contrast to the poorest third. And 78% of the richest quartile attends school with sufficient space in comparison with only 56 of the poorest one, according to Duarte and Jauregui Berri. Under this scenario, what do you think are the critical steps for safe return to schools when not everyone has access to the same infrastructure?
Okay, that's a very important question, especially as we think about equality and so on. And one of the critical steps that is necessary is to ensure that we engage as many stakeholders as possible, nationally, regionally, and internationally. And that conversation has started and is ongoing. We also look at learning from what other states are doing, in particular in our own region, the OECS and CARICOM, and see what can be adopted here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We understand the importance of a blended approach that takes into consideration as much of the dynamics as possible. So things like access to devices, and our government has been procuring devices for students who do not have access to devices. We have been looking into things like access to the internet and
Mhm.
ensuring that all schools have access to internet, and where possible, internet services have been improved. And we have also been looking at things like electricity for homes where that may not exist. So we have done an assessment and we understand where the gaps are, and we are working with our partners to see how we can address those gaps.
Excellent. Well, you're doing a lot. Thank you, Idelia. And I have another question related to uh, how the expectation that we have about how climate and health emergencies might increase in the future. So, in this context, what do you think that should be the current priorities for education ministries and schools to adapt and build more resilient communities and school communities in order to face the challenges ahead?
Well, certainly, I think that we have to revisit our plans, and we have to revise our plans in terms of our educational needs and our educational outcomes, right? So, planning is very critical because we realize that during this pandemic and all of the different disruptions, that there are some gaps, and so we need to conduct assessment to identify where those gaps are and see how we can revise goals, whether to do remedial work, and to see how we can ensure that our students are at the level that they should be at despite the challenges. Also, we need to do more in terms of integrating information technology and the use of the internet and so on into learning, not just during times of emergencies, but part of that normal process. So that integration needs to be done. And also, we need to enhance things like access to education in all areas, looking at things like equality, inclusivity, and quality education. We need to focus on social support or psychological support, ensuring that it becomes a part of the process and not just a one off when there are emergencies. And certainly, based on the agenda that I am involved in, we need to ensure that we are integrating the pillars of school safety in our whole education system. So ensuring that our school facilities are safe, ensuring that schools have disaster management plans in place, and these plans are tested, and that there are there is an integration of students, teachers, and the wider community in this planning process. And very importantly, to ensure that disaster risk reduction and resilience is a part of our curriculum, both formally and informally. And we in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have started that process. We developed a curriculum for our lower secondary school that integrates disaster risk reduction and climate change, not as a standalone subjects, but it can be integrated in any subject, even the foreign language, based on our testing of the curriculum.
Awesome. And this was before the COVID pandemic, or this is because of the pandemic that you designed
No, that was before the pandemic. As a matter of fact, in January of 2020, just before the COVID came on stream, we were in the piloting phase of the curriculum. So we would have piloted the curriculum in various subjects: integrated science, health and family life, the creative arts, foreign language, geography, history. And we had very good feedback from the schools that piloted the curriculum. And also, it's a curriculum that could be integrated into community organizations. So, um, I think that is a step in the right direction, because
Yes.
really and truly what we want to do is to build a culture of safety in our country.
And
And we
this
are well on our way.
and this curriculum, you are working only in San Vincent, or you have worked with other countries in the area, for example, with OECS, with CARICOM. I don't know. Is it solely for San Vincent, or there are islands as well?
At this point, this is specifically for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but we have been sharing our experiences and our knowledge in terms of developing the curriculum and integrating it with our regional partners, original um, countries.
Great. Yes, this is very important to share, because I know that resilient education, or education for resilience, is in the agenda to be included in the curriculums in many countries, not only in San Vincent. So maybe taking the lessons of San Vincent, this idea of piloting the curriculum first, I would be very happy to learn about what the teacher said about that, what the principal said about the curriculum. I don't know if the students were surveyed, or if you tested as their learning. What kind of testing did you do in the pilot test?
What we did is we visited a selected number of schools,
Yes.
and we selected schools in the Grenadines. We looked at rural schools, all girls schools, all boys schools. So we had a wide mix of schools, and we piloted the curriculum at different levels as well, in terms of Form 1, 2, and 3. And even outside of that, we did it in a Form 5 class, although it was not designed for that level, but we wanted to see whether it could be transferred across levels. And we had feedback. So we do have feedback from students and teachers, because we had focus group sessions after, and we also had interviews and so on before the curriculum was developed, to find out which areas needed to be integrated into the curriculum, and which areas certain aspects of safety already existed. And so we were able to get the feedback of teachers and students in the process. And also, like I said, we didn't just work with the schools. We also worked with the Teachers College. So we
Hmm.
had the involvement of pre-service and in-service teachers and also other stakeholders. So like the forestry, our buildings department, our National Emergency Management Office, our Sustainable Development Office, our National Red Cross Society, and a wide range of stakeholders because we understand the importance of multi-stakeholder approach.
For example, which kind of stakeholders?
So we like I mentioned, we looked at the community groups. So
Yes.
like for example, the Red Cross, we
Uh-huh.
had the cadets involved, we had the police involved, we had members from the water authority, we had members from our forestry department, so other persons who can support the program whether in the school or in the community. They were involved in reviewing the information, providing feedback, and they were also involved in testing the curriculum as well.
Right, thank you, Idelia. It is very interesting. I will go on asking you about this. Unfortunately, we have like we are almost on time, so I would like to ask you a last question to conclude the interview. And before you had told us in other spaces about your role, the specific role and leadership functions that you had during the volcano emergency. And in this sense, we would like you to close these conversations with three key pieces of advice that you can give to those leaders who are facing similar challenges in these times of emergency and uncertainty in terms of adaptability, innovation, and team management. I don't know. We are now we are aware of what's happening in Spain, for example, so a lot of houses and schools are being evacuated, and I don't know. I think a lot of people can learn from your experience.
Okay. Yes, it has been quite a challenge. We have learned a lot. As a matter of fact, for the last 5 months following the eruption, I have been assigned to the National Emergency Management Office, dealing specifically with the shelter management aspect of the process because most of the shelters were schools. And as I mentioned before, this in itself is quite a challenge because what we realize is that once the shelteries have left, that our schools are in need of very serious repairs. And also that sometimes it's difficult to find alternative locations for persons to go so that the schools can be available. So some of the key things that I think that have been important in this whole process is planning. Planning is critical before, during, and after any event. And it's important to plan at all levels as much as possible. So, the school level, the community level, and at the institutional level, and synchronizing the plans at the different levels. So, planning is key. Also, as I think I would have mentioned, it's important to integrate as much or involve as many stakeholders as possible, whether public institutions, private institutions, at the national level, at the regional level, and at the international level. Because the support is very important, and the guidance that we receive from all of our different stakeholders adds value to our programs, what we do, how we respond, and how we are able to recover and move forward. And the third thing that I would say is building human and financial capacity. So capacity building is key. And at the ministry, that became so important during the eruption because we had to use many of our our staff from within the Ministry of Education to ensure that we were able to respond while preventing the burnout of our staff having to deal with not just the eruption, but also having to deal with education continuity, even in the face of disasters. So those are the three key things that I would like to leave at this point.
Excellent. I was thinking about what you said about planning, because even in times of emergencies, you should. I don't know what you are meaning, like planning before an emergency occurs, or when the emergency occurs. Even at that moment, you have to step back and plan, because otherwise you get involved and you cannot think clearly. What you are meaning?
Exactly. Okay, so I mean planning at all levels. Planning before an emergency, right?
Yes.
Planning during the emergency, because sometimes the plan that you make before, you realize that the dynamics change during the emergency, and you have to plan, okay, how are we going to adjust based on the present situation? And then, even while you are planning your emergency response, you need to be thinking about your recovery response. So it's planning at all levels before something happened, during the process, changing the plan, updating the plan, and planning afterwards. How do we go forward from the situation? How do we build our resilience further? Right? Because there are some gaps that will come up while you're in an emergency situation, gaps that maybe you had not identified before.
So I guess that that's not a position for everybody. My full respect and admiration for what you have done, because it requires a lot of it, it needs to be, you need to be calm, you need to have the perspective to see despite the urgency. So again, my full respect and admiration, and I hope that these lessons, your experience, illuminates to others that are facing tough times at this moment, and also, as you said, ahead, because we have to plan for future pandemics, or other emergencies. We know that we are living in a world that is completely uncertain, so we have to have these plans. And thanks, Idelia, for this conversation. It has been a pleasure for us to listen to you, and we hope that we meet again soon. We also want to thank the organizing team that made this possible: GPE, IDRC, OECS, and also the SUMA team, my colleagues involved in this important initiative to continue thinking and discussing the educational challenges in the region and giving voice to the real leaders who are in the field struggling with real challenges. And we invite you to follow us on our social networks at Kixlack to be informed of upcoming events, news, and activities that we will carry out during this year. Thanks again to all of you, and see you next time.
You are welcome.